Let's see here. I think we're on the live here. Second, let's get that out of the background, that out of the background. All the other open apps. Hold on a second, guys. Here we go. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I am Doug with the Wakened by Yahuwah Assembly in Yahuwah Almighty Yahushua Messiah. My mom, Sharon, Sister Sharon, is with me tonight. We got Sister Marissa and Brother Dennis. And we are going to be doing our Sabbath evening study tonight. We are going to be doing Paul's letters. We're going back to that. We kind of put that off for a little while, but now we're getting back to that in the book of Hebrews chapter 5. My mom's going to start us off here while I'm able to get my scriptures open and kind of catch up a little bit. So whenever you're ready, Mom.
I'd like to start just a couple verses ahead where it brings in the whole subject of Yahushua the great high priest.
You mean the last couple verses of 4 you want to read?
Right. Yeah,
okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Yahushua HaMashiach, son of Elua, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of favor with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find favor to help us in our time of need. Okay, now 5. Every high priest is selected from among men, is appointed to represent them in matters related to Elua, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray. Since he himself is subject to weakness, this is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins, as well as for the sins of the people. No one takes this honor upon himself. He must be called by Elua, just as Aaron was. So Messiah also did not take upon himself the esteem of becoming a high priest, but Yahuwah said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And there's a cross reference there to
Psalms.
Yes, Psalms 95. Yes, right. And the note also says, "I have begotten you." Okay.
Also, just to add, piggyback off of my mom there, you can also find it in Proverbs 8 when it's talking about wisdom. Wisdom, I think in 8 verse 22 to 31 says, "Today you have begotten me." So wisdom lets you know that the person wisdom in the book of Proverbs is Yahushua himself pre-incarnate.
All righty. And he says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." During the days of Yahushua's life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by Elua to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. We have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain because you are slow to learn. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of Yahuwah's word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil.
Right. So that's pretty much self-explanatory. I don't think we can really expound more than what Paul was already saying there. So basically, he's talking to believers that seem to be not beginners, by the way. Yeah. I don't want you guys getting discouraged. What he's talking about is guys that and girls that have been in the walk long enough, learned correct doctrine from a shepherd, learned how to interpret the Bible correctly, and is still needing milk. This is why I say to people, because brothers and sisters say this to me all the time, and I'm not trying to say this as a knock, but I'll speak to many people in this walk, and they'll say to me, well, I was in Christianity and I learned the scriptures for 20, 30 years. I'm going to say something right now that might sound harsh. It doesn't matter how many years you were in the church. They taught you wrong for 20, 30 years. You need to relearn. You need to relearn and unlearn what you have learned in the church. And really, to Yahuwah, he only counts what you've learned so far in this walk. He doesn't count the church. He doesn't even look at that as you've learned anything from that, because there's so much corruption in their understanding of his word that really you didn't learn much. You learned a little bit here, a little bit there, but the majority of what you learned was men's opinions. The majority of the time, what you learned was doctrines of men. And that goes for any religion you came out of, whether it's Christianity, Judaism. You did not really learn the pure, unadulterated word of Yahuwah, the righteous word of Yahuwah. So that's all I want to say about that. Because I know some people will say to me all the time, well, I've read the Bible for 20, 30 years. But if you read it with a Christian's lens for 20, 30 years, those 20, 30 years really mean nothing. Paul knew the scriptures from a Judaism's perspective. And what does he say about his upbringing in Judaism or in rabbinical Phariseeism? He calls it dumb. Like, in other words, shit. That's what he considers it. So we need to take the same approach to our upbringings and what religions we've been brought in, and understand it's nothing compared to knowing the true Messiah, the true Creator that you didn't know before. Now you do, because now you're grafted into Israel. You're not a Christian any longer. So this is something we need to comprehend, and we need to understand that when we first come into this faith, that's where the experience starts. So for a lot of us, the moment we came into this Torah walk, that's when we first started really being taught the Bible from Yahuwah's point of view and from the righteous, pure point of view of his word. So for example, Yahuwah brought me in about 10 years ago. So I have 10 years of experience in this exact walk. And many other people have more experience in this walk than I do. Okay, I'm not trying to puff myself up. I'm not that experienced. But what we got to understand is, like, our mindset of 20, 40 years in Christianity, we need to throw out that mindset, because that doesn't really count. If you're being taught a wrong point of view of the scriptures for those many years, those are like 20 or 40 wasted years. I know, as harsh as it is to think, those are 2 to 4 decades of your life that was wasted, because it was in a religion that doesn't serve the Creator. Okay, it was in a religion that is of the devil. Okay, so we got to understand that. Now, I know some people will be like, well, Doug, you learned this and that in the church. Yes, it's true. I've learned certain correct doctrines in the church. Does that mean I actually have that much experience in his word, or that counts as extra experience knowing the Bible? No. I was taught certain things that just so happened to agree with his word. Certain other things way more things that didn't agree with his word. So when you look at it on an overall perspective, it really doesn't matter how many years you were in the church learning the Bible, because the majority of what they teach is not biblical. So, that's the point I'm trying to make. So basically, a lot of us, though, when we look at this chapter, this is a good chapter from Hebrews to kind of inspect each and every one of ourselves and say, okay, I better not be in this group that Paul's talking about that needs to go to milk again, needs to go to milk again, needs to go to milk again. I'm just going to give you an example of what he's probably talking about. All of us that have been in this walk, not the Christian walk, this walk for at least a good decade or two, should know what Yahuwah created on each day of creation. We should at least know that. We should at least know basic doctrines of the New Testament. Okay, who Yahusha is, his character. Okay, born of a virgin, the fullness of Yahuwah in human form, Colossians 2:9. We need to be able to know that like the back of our hand at this point. As far as knowing the whole Torah, no, Paul is not talking about that. What he's talking about is milk things, baby things. Baby things as in don't eat meat strangled to idols, right? Acts 18 or Acts 15, that's baby things, okay? Don't eat meat strangled to idols. We should be staying away from fornication, adultery, all these bigger sins like eating pork. We should not be debating still about when the Sabbath day is. Yeah. Okay? Or when a day starts. Okay? These are basic things. These are basics. I know a lot of people would disagree with me, but these are basics of the word. This is basics. Okay? I'm trying to think what else. That Yahushua was a pre-existent being. He's not a normal man. Okay? Even though he's fully human and fully Elohim at the same time, 100% man, 100% Yah at the same time. He had a pre-existence. He was co-creator. He was the other part of us in Genesis 1:27. We should know all that at this point. Those are baby things. Now, the reason Paul is writing a letter to this particular assembly, to a Hebrew assembly, possibly why he calls it Hebrews, because they have all this false doctrine going on that they still need to learn baby things. Yeah. He also, I think, isn't it also in Hebrews, Mom? I think in chapter 1 or something where it talks, or 1 or chapter 2, it talks about why are we having to relearn immersion? Why are we having to relearn laying on of hands? Why do we have to relearn these things? So Paul's talking about very basic to understand things. He's not talking about deeper things of the word here. He's talking about very basic things. And certain things of the Torah you could apply too. I think all of us, most of us out there know not to have tattoos, not to do this, not to do that. Do not learn the ways of Egypt. All this stuff. So this is just basic stuff. Paul obviously was not talking about differences in manuscripts, obviously, and stuff like that, because there was no differences. There was only one New Testament when he's writing the New Testament. I know a lot of people that's hard for them to understand, but all these different manuscripts we have, a lot of them did not exist at that point. He's just writing a firsthand letter. So he's not dealing with like all these other doctrines that just came about in the last couple of 100 years. Okay, he's not talking about, he talks about the Gnostics, but it's not like he has to devote a whole book to the Gnostics. Like he picks a couple chapters to expose them, but in this chapter you could attribute to the fact that we as a people don't know what day the Sabbath day is. We as a people don't know as a whole, or not unified on, when a day starts and ends. We should be. These are things that are basic things. A lot of us are not on the same page of, of eating food sacrificed to idols and what that means. So a lot of the basic things we really are lacking in the body right now, and this chapter is very applicable, actually, in my opinion. So basically, he's just trying to say, listen, like, you guys should already be shepherds at this point. The fact that I got to write to you and say this to you, is embarrassing. That's basically what he's trying to say. So I know a lot of
Doug,
people
would
out
you
there.
also say that it's also we should know his name by now? Should
Yeah,
those be one of the things that
well,
apply?
yeah, I would definitely say at least we should be not calling him God anymore, not calling him Jesus, not all of us that are in this walk, or if you want to use the word movement, should not be doing that.
That's
We should not be still flirting with the Circe and flirting with the
right.
church and
Right.
wanting to take things from the church and make it of Yahuwah, like contemporary Christian music. We should not be still listening to that. We should not be doing this and doing that when Yahuwah called us out years ago or decades ago. It's like this is what Paul was probably talking about. Now, a lot of the things they didn't have back then. So what they had back then was the temptation of mixing different belief systems with the belief of Messiah. So like Paul sometimes would be talking to people that were former Pharisees or still are Pharisees, and they have this Kabbalistic mindset, and they're trying to accept Messiah, and he's dealing with people like that, or he's dealing with other assemblies that would fall back in Gnosticism. And he's like, come on, guys, are you going to deny the resurrection and all that? So he's dealing with, like, in his day, the biggest problems they really had was all these other sects and groups that were like allowing Levin to come in, and he's like, come guys, enough of this. Like, if you don't believe in the resurrection, you have no hope. This is why he says this in his First Corinthians, Second Corinthians, I think First and Second Thessalonians. He talks to them about it as well. One of the biggest debates in the first century was whether there was at all, not even talking about just Messiah, but at all a resurrection of the dead at all. That was one of the biggest controversies. Another controversy was, what was the afterlife going to be like? Because people like the Sadducees thought that they were going to have lives in heaven, and this is why Yahusha,
Right.
rebuked them and said, you guys don't know my word. I'm just paraphrasing right now, but he's like, you guys don't know my word. Don't you realize that there is no marrying in heaven? Okay. And so this is like a lot of these things is what Paul and John had to deal with in their day. And this is why they dedicate so much time writing on certain things like this. The Gnostics were in their heyday in 100 AD, 200 AD. They were telling people, no, Yahushua was just a ghost on the stake, and he didn't really take on flesh. So that's why John had to dedicate a whole chapter in 1 John 4 to testing the spirits, because you had these Gnostics saying things like that, and then you had the Gnostics telling people, oh, you're a glutton if you feast, don't feast. So they were actually telling people not to keep the feast days. See, this is what Christians don't understand. They're taking Colossians 2:16-17, building a whole weird doctrine around it that Paul never intended. Paul was talking about debates of his day, not today. Debates of his day, where basically the Gnostics looked at anything you did was evil. So physical eating, evil. Feasting, evil. Sex, evil of itself. This is what the Gnostics believed. And so that's why Paul is warning us, even in 2 Timothy 4, right? Talks about in the latter days, what are they going to teach? To abstain from what? Marriage. If you abstain from marriage, how are you going to have sex righteously? Okay? So this is what Paul was warning us about. He was inspired by Yahuwah's Ruach, by Yahusha's Ruach, saying, this is going to happen. This is going to happen in the last days. We're in the last days right now. And you see people teaching religious veganism. That's another thing Paul was writing to Timothy about. So you see this, all this goes back to Gnosticism, all these weird beliefs. And there's a lot of Kabbalistic beliefs people are receiving. What do they call it? The Jewish zodiac, the Mazzaroth, the Bible codes are Kabbalistic. So is the Mazzaroth. So is this. So is that. And they're trying to blend it with the belief of the New Testament. And that's what was happening in Paul's day, in the first century. And this is why Paul is saying what he's saying about the circumcision party. The circumcision party most likely was a Pharisaical party that taught you had to be physically circumcised right away as a new believer to be saved. But they also taught probably other things. They taught mixture of things. Eventually, sects were teaching that Yahushua was just an angel. That's why in Hebrews 1, Paul has to explain that he's not just an angel. So everything Paul writes about, there's a reason he's writing about it.
Yeah.
It has to do with the debates of the first century. If you don't understand the debates of the first century, you're not going to be able to understand his letters. You're not going to be able to understand what's going on. If you don't research the Gnostics, you're not going to understand his letters, because a lot of his letters was debunking Gnosticism, was debunking Pharisaical Judaism and Kabbalism. If you don't know about that stuff, it's going to be hard to understand what Paul's talking about half the time. Many people don't know that he talks about many different laws. He's not just talking about the Torah when he uses the word law. He's also talking about the law of sin and death. He's also talking about there was an oral law known as, what was it called? The Dead Sea Scrolls called it something. The law of, where it talks about the law, no one who's justified, when he talks about no one can be justified by the law, and he talks about, I would have to go back to that, but the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal something about that phrase, the law of works, that it was not really talking about the Torah. It was talking about man's traditions. So when Paul is talking about the law of works, he's not talking about, exactly obedience to the Torah. He's talking about all these added laws, all these added commandments that these people at the Dead Sea Scrolls would add. Like a lot of the people, like the Essenes and them and this, they were rabbinical. They would add these laws that they would heap on top of the Torah and all that. You okay, Mom?
Yeah, I'm okay.
So anyway, so hopefully that helps you explain what he was talking about in this chapter. So let's see, we're at I think what, Hebrews 6 now. 6. So 6. And I think Hebrews 6 is actually going to go deeper into the whole beginning matters, elementary matters of Messiah, if I'm not mistaken. So he actually lists here what are the matters we should already know about, that are very basic. Let's see here. Okay, Hebrews 6:1. Because of this, and I'll start here, let us leaving the beginning message of the Messiah. So basically, he's saying you should already know the Besorah. If you don't know the true Besorah, you need to go back and learn it. And let us go on to perfection, or are you laying again another foundation for conversion from dead works and for belief in Yahuwah? So this has to be like such easy matters he's talking about. He's talking about conversion. He's talking about when you first become a believer. For the teaching of immersion, laying on of hands, for the resurrection from among the dead, and for eternal judgment. So, quote unquote, these are things we were supposed to learn when we first became believers. So these are things we should already know at this point. And I'll tell you what, in the church, they never taught me about the resurrection. Never. Never. They would always preach about the resurrection of the Messiah, and that, they believed in the resurrection of the Messiah on the third day, but they never taught you the resurrection as a whole, like the resurrection of the dead. First Thessalonians 4 and all that. They never teach that in the evangelical church. So these are baby matters according to Paul. Eternal judgment and all that. Baptisms. We shall do this if Yahuwah permits. Now, I know yours probably says the Master. In the Greek New Testament, probably just says, oh, okay, so it does say Elohim. Okay. I was just curious. Okay. So interestingly enough, the Aramaic here has Yahuwah here. We will do this if the Master Yahuwah permits, but those who descended once to baptism and tasted the gift from heaven, received the Spirit's set apartness, and tasted the true word of Yahuwah and the power of the future world, who would sin again and again impale the Son of Yahuwah and become contemptible, cannot be renewed to conversion. Now, what I would say to this, because some people have misinterpreted this. Now, does this mean if you fall back into certain sins, does that mean you can't that you're basically fallen away already? I don't think that's what it means. I think this has to be referring to like completely falling away from the faith. Because it says they have become contemptible, cannot be renewed to conversion. Now, Mom, wouldn't conversion be like when you first become a believer?
Yes.
So this is the context of someone who rejects the faith, then wants to come back. Okay. So that would be anyone who rejects this faith, walks away, and then tries to receive the good news again. But the earth, no. That comes to it often makes vegetation grows that what is useful for whom it is cultivated. All right, so whom it cultivated receives the baraka from Yahuwah, but it should produce thorns and thistles. It would be rejected and not far from curses, but its end is burning. But we are persuaded concerning you, my brothers, those things that are excellent, that accompany life, or it probably says salvation in yours, Mom, even though we speak in this way. For Yahuwah is not evil that he would disregard your works and your love, which you have shown in his name, which you have ministered to the set apart ones, and you do minister. Now again, in his name. But we desire that each one of you have this diligence for the perfection of your expectation until the end. And this is a big deal. So Paul, what's the whole context here so far, right? Paul's talking about beginning matters of the message of Messiah, the beginning of the good news, basic baby doctrines, not falling away from the faith completely. So now Paul is talking about expectation until the end. What is that referring to, right? It's referring to the day of salvation. Now, a lot of us have not even really accepted the true good news in our upbringing because we were taught that the day we become a believer, we're saved.
Yeah.
What does it say right there in verse 11? It says, until the end. Means your expectation is not realized until the end. Your gift of salvation is not given until the end, which means you have to endure till the end. Matthew 24, okay? All the authors of the New Testament tell you you're not saved yet. If you believe another good news, what does Paul say in Galatians 1:8-9? If you've received another good news, you are cursed. So a lot of us have to really renounce our former Christian faith because it's another good news. It's another Besorah. It's not the Besorah of Scripture. If you believe in your heart that you're saved at this moment and that you were saved when you did an altar call, you were given another good news. And that's a biblical fact. Okay? So this is what people don't understand. You're not even in the faith with Yahuwah at all. You're still under the curse of Christianity. You need to renounce it. And you need to be rebaptized and reimmersed in the true good news of the Bible. And the good news of the Bible is turning back to the Torah. It is being grafted into Israel. It's realizing that Yahushua came for his people, not the whole world. It's the fact that part of repenting means going back to the law. And that we're not saved until his second coming. All of this is different. This what do you call, Mom, what I just did? I condensed, right? This condensed understanding of the biblical good news is incompatible with Christianity's quote unquote gospel, okay? And that you should not lose heart, but that you would be imitators of those who by faith and patience have become heirs of the promise. Now, just because it says you become heirs of the promise does not mean you've been given salvation. What it does mean is that you're an heir, okay? And even when you're given an inheritance, are you given an inheritance the moment you become an heir? No. Okay? So again, context. For when Yahuwah made a promise to Abraham, because there was no greater than he by whom he could swear, he swore by himself. Now, this is an interesting one, this verse, and I'll tell you why. Think about it, right? If this is only talking about Yahuwah, why would it say he swore by himself? A lot of times you'll see wordage, you know what I'm talking about, Mom, where it says, by himself he made the heavens, by himself he did this. He's like almost referring, he's basically referring Yahusha in a roundabout way as himself. Because there's a verse in Isaiah that says, by myself I made the heavens.
Yeah.
But then when you go to Proverbs, it says, by his right hand he made the heavens. So you see that there's a oneness there. He's referring to Yahusha, his only begotten son, as part of himself, is what he's saying. So that's something always to make a note of. By the way, how do I know this for a fact? The Aramaic Targums of the Torah, where in Genesis it says, I swear by myself, it will say Yahuwah swore by his word. So just a little proof for people out there that are skeptical. Okay. And he said, Baraka, I shall barak you, and multiply, and I shall multiply you. And in this way he was patient and received the promise. For among men, they swear by that which is greater than they, concerning every dispute which they have had among them, and sure end of it has come by a vow. Because of this, Yahuwah was all the more willing to show the heirs of the promise that his promise would not change, and he bound it with in vow or oath. That by two unchangeable matters, because Yahuwah cannot lie about them, we who have sought refuge in him have great comfort, and we may seize the expectation which was promised to us. Notice how it says, we may seize the expectation. Since it says may there, we have not been given it yet. There's the expectation still waits, which we have an anchor that holds fast in our soul, Yahusha, which will not be moved and has entered inside the veil, where Yahusha entered before for our sake and has become the priest for eternity in the image of Melchizedek. Now, I don't like how some translations will say, what does yours say, Mom? The manner of Melchizedek or the like?
In the order.
Order, yeah. See, I kind of wonder if there's certain biases with the translators here, because order of Melchizedek does not mean he himself is Melchizedek. It just means it's after an order.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like after a priesthood. So, for example, right, Zadok, right? Was he literally Aaron, or he was after the same order of Aaron?
Right.
So that's the difference. That's why I prefer the Aramaic image of Melchizedek. So basically, the Aramaic there, instead of saying order, it says image, which means he bears the same image as Melchizedek in Genesis 14, which means he is Melchizedek. So there was a doctrinal issue, for those that don't know, in even as early as the early Talmudic period, they started teaching that Melchizedek was not Yahusha and that he was Shem. So when you see translators saying after the order of Melchizedek, either they don't know what the Greek means or they have an agenda. Because order is different from image. It's way different. And let me see if I can just show you guys on the shared screen. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this wasn't on the shared screen the whole time. I apologize for that. All right, so you look at right where it talks about order, right? The word order.
Can't open it.
We got a little background. Got a little background noise here. Hold on a second, guys. I apologize here. Got a little background noise. So I just wanted to show you guys here that the word order is not really order. It should be, go to shared screen here. I'll show you guys from the Greek here. This is definitely a mistranslation here from the Greek. Taxis. Now, order is one of the definitions, but it also has arrangement, character, fashion, quality, style. So to be made in the fashion of something is like you're made in almost the same exact image of something. And also, if you go to the root word, authority, okay, mutually, to appoint, ordain, assign, but same character and fashion. Now, think about it, right? Mm-hmm. If Yahusha has the same character or personality as Melchizedek, can he be a different person than Melchizedek? Think about it. Like, can someone that's not me have my personality or my character? Can't, right? So that's why I side more with how the Aramaic there has it translated, because it says image rather than order. Order just means it's an order of a priesthood. That's all it means. Mm-hmm. So depending on who, any doctrinal biases that modern Bibles have, if they're trying to side with the Jewish people, what they try to do sometimes, and I've heard it, this is how they wiggle their way around it, is they'll say that Yahusha was in the order of Melchizedek, but he wasn't Melchizedek of Genesis 14. Mm-hmm. Those that want to cater to Jewish thought. So if you see what I'm saying. So that's why it's a big deal, in my opinion. So let's see here. We got just one chapter left. Let's see here. Chapter 7. How long is chapter 7, Mom?
Not that long. Not that long. Just like one column.
Okay.
Over the next page.
How about you start chapter 7 for me?
Sure.
And when I get back, I'll try to pick up where you are.
Okay. This Melchizedek, was king of Salem and priest of Elohim Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and baruched him. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness. Then also, king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the son of Yahuwah, he remains a priest forever. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the plunder. Now the law requires the descendants of Levi who become priests to collect a tenth from the people, that is, their brothers, even though their brothers are descended from Abraham. This man, however, did not trace his descent from Levi, yet he collected a tenth from Abraham and baruched him, who had the promises. And without doubt, the lesser person is baruched by the greater. In the one case, the tenth is collected by men who die, but in the other case, by him who is declared to be living. One might even say that Levi, who collects the tenth, paid the tenth through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of his ancestor. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the law was given to the people, why was there still need for another priest to come? one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron. For when there is a change of the priesthood, there must also be a change of the law. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our master descended from Yehuda, and in regard to that tribe, Moshe said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear. If another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest, not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life, for it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Cross-reference Psalm 110, verse 4. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless. For the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced, by which we draw near to Eloah. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath, but he became a priest with an oath when Yahuwah said to him, Yahuwah has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Because of this oath, Yahusha has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Now, there were many of those priests, since death prevented them from continuing in office. But because Yahusha lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to Yahuwah through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest meets our need, one who is set apart, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men who are weak, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son who has been made perfect forever.
So, no. Yeah. Verse 3 here is making it very clear Yahusha is Melchizedek here. It says, without genealogy, he would not have a genealogy. In his human flesh existence, he has no father and mother. He has no human father or mother as a pre-existent heavenly being, being co-creator. He has no father and mother. He has no beginning of days nor end of his life. He's the Alpha and Omega. But in the likeness of the Son of Yahuwah, his priesthood remains for eternity. Notice how it says in the likeness rather than the order. Does yours say order?
Like the Son of Eloah.
Oh, it says like the Son of. Okay. Because this says likeness. Likeness would be image.
Yeah.
So image gives more of an idea that it's him, Yahusha himself. Because, even in a human understanding, no one has the image you have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a long lost twin somewhere. I know there's this whole doppelganger nonsense that people believe in. usually you don't have a long lost twin that you're not related to. Okay, usually every human being that's existed has their own likeness. So that's kind of the point there. He is in the likeness of Yahusha because he is Yahusha. That's the whole point. So I know those out there will say, oh, after the order Melchizedek, they'll use the word order. They'll use the word he's like the son of Yahuwah, but he's not the son of Yahuwah. Likeness is a little different than like. Likeness would be image, like form, image. Okay. But see how much greater is this one than the man Abraham, chief of the fathers, to whom he gave the tithe of the best. For those of the sons of Levi, okay, for this was yet in the loins of his father when he met Melchizedek. Okay. Notice how it says here, and this is the context about what was changed in the Torah. It says, just as the priesthood changed, there was a change in the law. Not that the law itself went away, not that the whole law got changed. There was a specific isolated change inside the Torah. What is that? New priesthood. You can't have physical sacrifices in a heavenly priesthood. You can't do certain things in a Melchizedek priesthood. That's change. For he about whom these things were said was born from another tribe, from which a man never ministered at the altar. Okay, talks about in the image, not order, image of Melchizedek. He who is not by the law of carnal commands, but by the power of an indestructible life. For he testified about him, you are the priest for eternity in the image of Melchizedek. Okay. Yahuwah has sworn and will not lie that you are the priest for eternity in the image of Melchizedek. So this goes on to say that even though it seems it was given to David, David was more of a foreshadowing of who the promise of being Melchizedek actually went to. That David was a messianic foreshadowing. This is the covenant in which Yahusha is the guarantor and is entirely better. And there were many priests because they were dying, were not permitted to continue. But this one's priesthood, because he is eternal, does not pass away. And he can give life for eternity to those who come near to Yahuwah by him. For he lives always and offers prayers for our sakes. For because this priest also was right for us pure, without malice, without defilement, who is separate from sin and exalted higher. That's interesting. It says exalted higher than heaven. He has no compulsion every day as the chief priest to offer sacrifice first for his sins and then for the people. For this one did not one time by his life which he offered. For the law establishes weak men as priests, but the word of the vow, which was after the law, the Son who is perfect for eternity. And again, there's tons of things here that show that Yahusha is Yahuwah here. The fact that it says he's exalted higher than the heaven. Okay, a regular messenger or a regular heavenly being is not exalted above heaven. We can go to a verse real quick in the Tanakh to show you that it's actually evil for anyone that is not equal to Yahuwah to claim this. Okay, we'll give you an example here in Isaiah where Satan wants to be the same thing, but it is sinful for him to want so. And he basically wants to be like Yahuwah even though he's not. Okay, so how are you fallen from heaven, O Hillel, son of the morning? Isaiah 14:12 I'm at. How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? How you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Elohim. I will sit also at the mountain of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. So notice verse 14 there. It says above the clouds. The word clouds there, I think, would be the same Hebrew word as heaven. I'm not mistaken. Or okay, it's not. But you get the same idea. Satan, it's evil here because he is not given that authority to be exalted that high. Satan is trying to be like Yahuwah, like Yahusha. He's trying to be exalted above heaven. So as you see there, only Yahuwah can be exalted to that state. That's why it says he wants to be like the Most High. If that makes any sense. So to me, that's proof that Yahusha has to be Yahuwah. There's no other option. There's no other option there. If he's not Yahuwah, then we would have to. Um, I see this as a hypothetical, but those that want to argue that he's not Yahusha, then you would have to reject the whole you would have to reject the whole New Testament, because constantly Paul and John alone are saying that Yahusha is equal to Yahuwah, that he is equal to the Father, that he is the Father. If they're wrong, then you got to reject the New Testament and you got to reject the New Covenant, because literally that's what they're claiming all the time. That's what the New Testament authors claimed all the time. And Paul is very specific here about that. To claim that Yahusha is exalted that high, he's never exalted that high. So that's the point. So that I know a lot of people that will say that, well, he's a little bit lesser than Yahuwah. If he's lesser than Yahuwah, he can't be exalted that high. So Isaiah 14:14 is the one I went to, which shows that the devil had a sinful will to do that, to ascend and exalt himself above the clouds. And Mom, what verse in yours of Hebrews 7 does it talk about Yahusha's exalted above heaven? Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Verse 26. Hebrews 7:26, and again it says, harmless, undefiled, separate from sin, and made higher. Now, I don't like the fact that the King James says made higher. That's not in the text, I don't think. The Aramaic says here, who is separate from sin and exalted higher than the heavens. So yes, I think the word made higher, like the word made, is not in the Greek. The King James, I think, is adding it there. So exalted higher than heaven.
Yeah, that's what mine says.
So the NIV agrees with the Aramaic? Yes. Okay, so yeah. Let me just see here. I want to look at the other Peshitas I have here. Etheridge. Yep, Etheridge, same thing. Exalted higher than heaven. So again, guys, if he's not Yahuwah here, Paul's in big trouble. I'm playing devil's advocate here. If Paul is wrong about this in Hebrews 7:26, we got a big issue with the New Testament, because guess what? He is not the only one saying stuff like this. You have John saying the same thing. You have who's the guy that said my master and my Elohim? Who said that? Thomas?
I think yes, that was Thomas. Yes.
Yeah, so he's calling Yahusha his Elohim. Okay, mortal man cannot be a deity. Okay, so again, right here. Yeah, this is the one I'm talking about. John 20:28. And Thomas answered and said to him, my master and my Elohim. So right there, clearly have Yahusha being called Yahuwah by saying that. And by the way, Paul himself says, I think in Ephesians or somewhere, where he says, I worship the Elohim of our fathers, of our ancestors. So in no way, shape, or form is Paul saying that Yahusha is some new God that came about. he's actually saying that Yahusha is the Elohim of their ancestors in human form. Paul's saying that all the time. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys out there, uh, I hope you guys got edification by watching this study with us and going through this study with us. Have a great rest of your Shabbat, and Yahuwah willing, see you tomorrow. Roughly around 2:30, 3 p.m. We should be on the live. So, Yahusha willing. See you tomorrow, guys. Love all y'all.